Welcome to the Adapter's Advantage, the podcast that shares insider stories about breakthrough moments that lead to success. Get ready for an inspiring conversation about adapting to change from Allego, the all-in-one sales enablement platform built for success in a hybrid world. Let's dive right in.
Hello, I'm Mark Magnacca. I want to welcome you back to the next episode of the Adapter's Advantage podcast. Today I'm here with Bill Harmon, the Chief Client Officer of Voya Financial. Before we jump into our conversation, I want to give you a little background on Bill. So in his role as Chief Client Officer, Bill leads the health and wealth, sales, distribution, and relationship management teams at Voya. He and his team support Voya's efforts to deliver holistic solutions that help employers and their employees address their health and wealth needs and achieve greater financial wellness. He also serves on Voya's enterprise leadership team. Prior to joining Voya in 2017, Bill served as the Senior Vice President Core Markets for Empower Retirement, where he was responsible for the segment's overall success. During his 29-year tenure at Empower for the U.S. retirement business, he contributed to significant growth in plan sales, assets, and earnings. Outside of the workplace, Bill has been very active with nonprofits that serve the special needs community, which is consistent with Voya's own commitment to serve this community through its Voya Cares effort. For 11 years, including 5 as president, Bill served on the board of Adams Camp, a group of nonprofit organizations providing a variety of intensive, personalized, and integrated therapeutic programs for children with special needs and their families. He's also been closely involved with organizations supporting the special needs community, including the Special Olympics, the Rocky Mountain Down Syndrome Association, and he currently serves on the board of directors at the Arc of the Farmington Valley, a program based in Canton, Connecticut, focused on helping individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities achieve their personal best. More to come on that topic. And with that, Bill, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Mark. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. And Bill, there's so much encompassed in what I've just described about what you do. So the question is, when people meet you and they ask you that question, what do you do at Voya? What do you say?
You know what? I am blessed. I'm the guy who gets to lead this very talented and passionate team of client-facing individuals that their passion can be seen in helping Americans get to that glorious moment of being able to retire and do so being financially prepared and emotionally prepared. And they do that through helping employers and intermediaries think about things holistically. Like how can someone think about how do I make benefits decisions, both on my health side as well as on my workplace savings side in a very complementary or harmonized way, so that, wow, maybe I should take this benefit here, save some of the money, invest it over here, and look at the whole big picture. And I just don't think people do that enough. And I've got this great team that can look at that really holistically to help people get to that magical moment.
Bill, that's such a critical word because I think so often in the financial services industry, things are so segmented, right? We think about the investment advisor who talks about investments and the insurance agent who talks about insurance and the health insurance specialist, right? And each one of them sort of has their own domain. And yet, despite many people talking about wanting to do it, the notion of having, in effect, your own quarterback who can facilitate these different pieces, often it doesn't manifest. So what brought you to this idea of combining health and wealth in your role?
Well, it's probably an overused term of being client-centric, but it really is that, in the sense that you and I work for companies and we have benefits that, once a year we have to make these decisions, and we're probably pretty overwhelmed. The average American has 17 different benefits decisions to make. And typically when you click through them, money's coming out of your paycheck.
Right.
And so then when we get to them and we say, hey, let's talk about saving for retirement, they kind of look at you and say, are you kidding me? Do you know how much money just came out of my paycheck from my first 15 decisions? I'm exhausted. I'm confused. I don't know. But if instead we could say, hey, wait a second, here at Voya, we've got this great team that focuses on employee benefits. We've got this great team that focuses on workplace savings. And then within that, you sort of have some of these bridge products like HSA Is
Right.
our health savings accounts? Is that more of like a super flexible spending account, FSA, or is that more like a highly tax advantaged savings instrument? And so you can look at it both ways. We look at it and say, well, if you have let's say a 401k, and I'm saving, then what you really want to do is protect that account. We want to help you get to where you're ready to retire and you can live off of that. And that's its purpose.
Right.
But there are threats. And one of the big threats, like the number one reason why people take hardship distributions, are unexpected and unbudgeted healthcare costs. Oh, wait, I mean, they're related. Well,
Yeah.
maybe when we make these decisions as we're going through, I should have the appropriate protection components when I'm making my benefits decisions so that that event doesn't happen and cause me to take a hardship distribution where I get taxed, penalized, probably delay my retirement by 3 years to go ahead and replenish it. That's really what we're thinking. And there's numerous examples of how they're really interdependent and not, like you say, independent decisions.
That's a really big insight, Bill, that you've just pointed out, because it's almost like, if you use the medical analogy, if the doctor is only focused on helping you treat an illness and not help you think about preventative medicine, right? It becomes very siloed. And the interesting thing, Bill, as you were just going through that, is I'm a former financial advisor, 15 years as a financial advisor, and I'm also an employee of Lego. But when I was clicking through all of those boxes, FSA, HSA, like, I had exactly that same experience. And a lot of them, I don't really even understand kind of which bucket they fall into. So I think the notion of this word that you used, holistic, just like in medicine, why shouldn't it be a more holistic view of the human being? Because both their health and their wealth are very much interrelated.
Health is a financial event because there's out-of-pocket costs that are you have to pay for with US currency, that
Right.
if you don't have that money saved in an HSA, saved in an emergency savings, saved whatever, where do you go? You typically go over to your retirement. And that's why, yeah, we really, and like we always say, you and I, we are somewhat experts because we're employees of a company. We know what that journey looks like. And I'll tell you, I add another one. We all know that the war for talent, our customers, Voya, the war for talent is real. And if employers are using benefits as a way to attract and retain quality employees, you really want to make sure they understand and appreciate them. They're spending millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on robust benefit packages. Yet I saw a stat that of employees that left their employer, one of the top reasons that they left was benefits. Either they didn't like them there or they perceived them to be better somewhere else. I would argue they didn't understand them, which would then help them appreciate benefits. And so when we think about things like this more holistically and how can we really bring it all together, I think there'll be a better appreciation of the benefits and the money being spent on them because they're more personal to me. I made these decisions for my own situation because my situation, Mark, is probably different than your situation. So one size doesn't fit all, and we all need to appreciate all the different opportunities and options and what makes most sense for me.
I would build on that, Bill, with one comment I had with my grandfather who died at 99. He was born in 1918. And I remember talking to him about this 401k, and he said, you know what, in 38 years at Pratt& Whitney, I didn't make any decision about my health care. I didn't make any decision about the investments for my pension. He said, literally, I just did my job. And all of that was taken care of. So we take for granted that for so many workers, everything you've just said is really a phenomenon of the last 30 years, right? That most of our parents and grandparents, it wasn't even part of their world to make all of those decisions because the company was making those decisions on their behalf.
And you want to make it even more complicated. And now we probably have two working spouses. And then you have to go and say, well, which plan should we go on, yours or mine? Like you went from not having to make any decisions and there was one income earner to now you have two and have to go ahead and do that analysis.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. Well, Bill, let's rewind the tape for a minute. I just want to go back in time, and to understand the journey that's brought you here. I want to understand who influenced you along the way, and how did you get into financial services?
Y- by mistake. I was in college. I went to Loyola Marymount University, and it was going to be my practice interview, which was with Great West at that time. And the more I learned about it, I thought this is really interesting. And ironically, it was doing both employee benefits that included 401k and talking to employers about thinking as they design their plans more holistically on balance on benefit spend. And I really enjoyed that. That had elements of being consultative. You learned a little bit about investments. You learned about tax laws. You learned about medical conditions and how to finance all of those. And so at age 21, I learned a lot about a broad range of employee benefits and then how employers make decisions. So it was a really, really fun way to start my career, and did a very robust training program for college graduates. And then I was there,
I
as you said, for 29 years.
So, Bill, as we just sort of fast forward from what brought you here, I read an article that you wrote recently. It's called "The Evolution of How We Work," and you said, "quote: The reality is that as companies are returning to the office will not look the way it used to appear." And I'm wondering, what does the research that you've compiled in writing this suggest about the future of in-person and virtual?
Yeah, we've done a lot of just analysis. We've worked with different consultants that, and it's hard to go ahead and generalize because many employers are different as far as coming back to work. But even then, they're still dealing with customers or prospective customers that aren't fully back at work. So really, this whole concept of hybrid work environments has really taken over, and we've really had to adapt. Not even just our physical space, which we've adapted our physical space as well to where it's more hoteling, collaboration rooms, collaboration spaces, all of that. But we've also had to go ahead and learn how to communicate differently. For instance, we did some really interesting work with Deloitte on the neuroscience of of a presentation, how an audience consumes information and so on. So we literally had our sales team, our full sales team of all of our subject matter experts do a presentation, and we had the audience with the glasses that track where your eyes follow,
Right.
with probes to find out how they are emotionally reacting to the presenters. And then we had our salesperson then read it. First of all, she saw how they reacted to her, to all the other speakers. And it was fascinating, like just a couple tidbits. You really can't have one speaker speak for more than 4 minutes. You need to then transition to another speaker, and it needs to be a warm handoff, like you've known each other forever. You have to speak to the slide. They have situations where a slide was up and they're telling a story and so on, but it's nothing on the slide, and you can see eyeballs going all over the place. You lost the emotion of the audience. You also have to change sort of medium. You have to change if you're going to do a demo, if you're going to do a video, alternate that so you can keep their interest up. And so we trained so our team, our sales team, our client-facing teams on these are some of the things you need to think about so that you can keep the audience engaged. And I say that because you and I, we've been in front of customers many times, and if we're face to face, we could probably read their body language, their eyes, and know if they're engaged. If I'm doing that in front of you, but yet there's another group that's over virtually, I can't read them. And I
Right.
have to know, kind of flying blind, how are they reacting to what I'm saying or my team saying or all of that. So all of that we've said, this is kind of the new way you have to engage a customer or a prospective customer in this new environment that we're in. And we're going to be in this hybrid environment because people have learned how to work virtually.
So one aside, coming back to that, as someone who I know has deployed sales enablement technology to your own sales force, what have you learned? Um, I'll call it during and as we move post pandemic to driving adoption in the context of sales enablement technology, whether it's a Lego or any of the pieces in your technology stack?
Yeah, I think for one, it needs to be really personalized. It needs to be personalized to the customer or personalized to the user. So, I think it also needs to be very intuitive. If you go and you for sales enablement, and we have all this information, and they say just go to that site and find it, they won't. And so
Right.
instead, if they can just go in to type up a topic, and then it comes up and says here the following items, and you know what, with that item, you might want to include that item, and even with something that says, and here's how you deliver it, some talking points to it and so on. That's, our head of sales enablement, Vanessa, and she's a genius on being very intuitive, being very personalized, and then being very simple on delivery. But you really always, and from there, you want to make sure that it's simple to follow up. You and I, while we may sell to customers and expand our relationship, we also are being sold to often by other vendors. And we
Right.
know what it feels like. And it really needs to be about me and be relevant. And then my next set of thinking, you almost have to know what I'm thinking about next so you can deliver that as well.
Bill, just as an aside, I was just on one of our roundtable sessions with a number of Vanessa's peers, and one of the women brought up this terrific idea where she outlined her commitment as the leader in sales enablement, and then they asked the sales leaders to, in effect, sign this pledge. And it's this is what we've committed to do for you, and this is what you're committing to do in terms of accountability, because we can't be held accountable to make this happen if the people report to you. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious, what's your belief system around helping to drive accountability, knowing someone like Vanessa and team have built this great program to actually get sales management to help make it accountable?
That's the first group she goes to. You have to have buy-in from the management team. And then really, if you get, I always call it the noisy alphas. So if you get a couple of your alphas and they're pretty noisy amongst the group and
Yeah,
they're big believers. So
yeah.
Vanessa's very quick to go and find the noisy alpha and sort of ninja train them, because then they're going to get noisy inside. So it's one thing you get the leaders to go say it, and then you get peers to go say it, and you get that noisy alpha that really says it loudly. Everyone said, well, wow, if John Doe's doing this, then I need to be doing that, because boy, look at his or her numbers.
It's so That's so true, and it's interesting. As much as we think human beings have changed, they really haven't changed that much in that
No.
regard. That dynamic was true in Roman times, and it's
Yep.
true, in this modern era. So, Bill, I want to segue back though to your title of Chief Client Officer, which I know was an intentional title that you chose. And I know that part of that role, you actually are flying out and doing in-person meetings again. Um, I'm curious, what's the biggest insight that you've learned by investing time with your clients personally, where you're on the ground and you're getting to understand their issues face to face?
Yeah, I mean, just even looking in their eyes on how, number one, how truly interdependent the employee benefit side is with workplace savings components. And so, and what they're doing just to try to retain quality employees, to attract. I mean, most employers have so many open recs right now, and they're just trying to attract employees. So they're very open into saying, how can you help us with this? And by the way, how can we deliver it in a modern sort of a way? And so this quick, I learned this. I spoke with this great author, Lisa McLeod. She wrote a book, Selling with Noble Purpose, and what she said is that the world went through a simultaneous existential crisis. And normally people, when they go through an existential crisis, they're really wondering, who am I? What am I doing? All of this. That happens when they lose a loved one, or maybe the birth of a child, something, a big event. COVID was a big event globally, and
Right.
everyone went through this. And now we're sort of seeing the ripple effects of all of that, that everybody went through an existential crisis. And that's what's causing this sort of, this massive turnover. It's sort of the great resignation. And then is it the great regret? And then is it the great whatever's next? And so everyone's looking at this with this fresh set of eyes and saying, do you have any good ideas? What's big thinking these days? And so that's what I find, particularly in my role, to go out and with my client-facing teams and say, here's some thinking that's out there right now. Some of the neuroscience work that we've done, some of the office structure, some of the benefits thinking, some of the technologies that we've invented, because they're all looking at, you're right, people consume information differently. I need them to consume this information and appreciate it, and I need to probably rethink how I'm structuring my benefits.
So, Bill, I'm going to pull three things together that you just described. I'm going to go back to the comment you made about neuroscience, which I'll call sort of the unique Voya knowledge on this topic. And then I want you to think for a moment, one of the topics that recently came up in this roundtable I was mentioning was the notion of helping salespeople be influencers and thought leaders themselves. So not just I'm the salesperson and oh by the way I can bring Bill in as a thought leader, right? But also this cascading that Bill's developing these insights and that I could be someone that you're calling. And if you think about for a wholesaler at Voya or one of the retirement plan advisors that you serve, in both those cases, you might be communicating with as many as 100 different people. And you're not just talking about their 401k plan. So this notion of recognizing that your people can be thought of as influencers or thought leaders on a topic, all of a sudden that infuses new meaning in that I'm not just selling a product, I'm here to help uh, in effect consult on how can I help you based on the specialized knowledge I have. Is that something that is happening yet at Voya relative to your sales team capturing some of what you've just described?
I think what you just described is purpose-driven selling. Like if I could be here just to go ahead and sell you a widget, whatever it might be, if you've asked me to talk about a 401k plan or a supplemental health benefit, but if we can go bigger into, well, what's the question behind the question? What's the need behind that? And
Right.
so it's really just, and it feels so much more fulfilling when you're selling with greater purpose. And so I know that you're evaluating your retirement plan, but I think there is something even bigger here because there's a greater need that we can talk about. And here's some bigger thinking. And, examples of this, which really attracted me to Voya, is, there are different communities that within your company, within your community that are underserved. And so you and I've talked about Voya Cares to really help the special needs community, people with disabilities and special needs, and caregivers of their loved ones with special
Right.
needs. They're underserved, and there's something that we could do as an industry to help them out. And how do you weave that in? That sounds very purposeful. Again, did I mention anything about a 401k plan within that? I'm talking about Americans that need to go and save. They're dealing with their life's path. And I'd love some insights on helping me get there, but I have some of these deviations to my path.
It's such a great point, Bill. And my own experience in what you just said is that it's so much more meaningful for both buyer and seller. And it's again, I'll go back to the medical metaphor here. It's like the doctor who you meet who's actually invested in helping you regain your health, not just let me give you the script and get out of here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a deeper meaning. Can we just pivot on that point? I mentioned in your introduction about some of the work that you do with the Arc of the Farmington Valley and the Special Olympics. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what have you learned from your involvement with these great organizations?
I think anyone would tell you that they get more from it than they contribute to it. I've been blessed. I truly have been blessed in my life, in that our first son, William, was born with Down syndrome, and I didn't know much about that world, and it has been such a great ride. He is the coolest cat on the planet, and just, I think of any father, any parent, boy, you would, if you had a superpower to go and help someone be comfortable, especially an adolescent, to be comfortable in their own skin. William is as comfortable, he's more comfortable in his own skin than anyone I've ever met.
I
And
love that.
and it's so cool just to see that community. Now, when you get to beyond that, then you say, well, the parents, and there's oftentimes medical concerns, or there's lots of therapy. My goodness, my wife has been through so many different iterations of different therapies and so on. We've been very passionate about it, but there's this other community that's helping them, that are guiding, whether it be through different types of therapy. And so Adams Camp is this intensive therapy organization, but they provide multidisciplinary therapy for a child with special needs, because they like, kind of like we're talking about, they want to treat the whole human,
Right.
and not just the speech part of you or the physical therapy part of you, but they treat the whole you. And so miracles happen when you do that. Favarh, Arc of Farmington Valley, is amazing, where they say, we want to help create independence for this community as much as we can. So they do it in so many different ways, but they could even, William, when we lived out in Connecticut, had 3 different jobs through Favarh. While he was in high school, they would pick him up, take him to that job, and so on. And as if he gets older and we were in Connecticut, they could even have housing and meal and all of this, so they can live independent lives, which is so fulfilling. And you just look at the looks on all of their faces and say, this is awesome. And same thing with the caregivers. And so the executive directors that I've worked with through those organizations are superhuman. I mean, I'm so inspired by the work that they do, that of course I want to be involved in that, because you see the reaction. That's, talk about purpose driven. That is incredible.
Bill, as you're talking about that, it brings it back to me. I think even as you describe William, you recognize that sometimes the beauty of someone sharing, as you describe, being comfortable in your own skin, and knowing it's a person without guile. Like there's no pretense, right? There's no like trying to do something other than what they actually
No
are.
filter.
No filter, right? Which is so refreshing too in the culture that we
Mhm.
live in. Um, but there's something else. My co-founder, at almost every meeting, we talk about infusing the meaning into our work, as the belief that success at work is fundamental to human happiness in
Mhm.
almost every culture. This notion that um, to be successful in your work, and our frame of reference is if we can help new hires become successful faster, we can help share best practices, like you're helping people become more successful. And what's so beautiful about the point you just made is where William has these 3 jobs, all of us at every different level, whatever, whether you're the CEO or you're starting out, the notion of work having a purpose, there's almost this sacred element that for the vast majority of us, we get meaning from that vocation that we've chosen, whatever it might be.
It's funny, when I was in college, I actually was wanted to be an industrial psychologist, because I always felt that if you are going to work because you have to, and if you do that for 45 years because you have to, you don't like it, you don't like the people around you, you're not fulfilled. I said, that's a prison sentence. And I think that
Yes.
would lead to all sorts of other ugly things, substance abuse, domestic abuse, all that. And I thought, but if you actually woke up and said, I love what I do, um, that would be, the world would be so much better. And even to that point, when you like moving it back to retirement and the purpose of all of it, I want people to be ready to retire when they're ready to retire, as opposed to, nope, I had to take hardship distribution 5 years ago. I'm here because I have to be here. That doesn't sound fulfilling. That doesn't sound productive. Doesn't sound healthy. All of that stuff. So if instead we could say, you did it, you're at that moment. I just saw all 3 of our kids had the same kindergarten teacher, and she'd been there for 35 years, and she just retired. And it was at a graduation party, and I said, how fulfilling that you probably still remember them with their kindergarten faces, but now they have beards and so
Yeah,
on.
right.
But you've done this like through generations. Like, I do this for a living, is watching the look on your face that you made it, you
Yeah.
retired and you're ready to go, and how rewarding it must be to go and see what you've done. Like that, to me, that's what I get out of all of this.
So I'm gonna pivot back just for a minute because we're sort of talking at the high level here, but one of the ironies of the work that you're in is that I read from another financial services companies that a third of their participants do not contribute either at all or enough to the 401k to even get the matching amount. So if the company matches, 6% or 3, whatever the number is, they're not even putting that amount of money away. So what do you think is behind that piece, and what's the biggest challenge that you think employees are facing as they effectively try to prepare for retirement?
Yeah, that's that really is it, leaving money on the table like that. I think so the industry, what they would do there is either put in auto enrollment and try to get them to a certain number, or auto escalate, or a lot of education. But I think the conversation's bigger than that. I think what we need to do is kind of be in the room where it happens. You need to be in the conversation 15 benefits decisions ago, because I would bet that that person is enrolled in the more expensive of the 2 or 3 medical options.
Right.
And I wonder if they really need to be. Like, I've seen stat after stat on how many Americans are overinsured but undersaved. And so could we kind of balance that out a little bit better? Like, for instance, if all of a sudden I could, instead of being in the PPO, I could be in a consumer driven health plan, a high deductible health plan.
Right.
Maybe that saves me 200 bucks a paycheck, a pay period.
Right.
Well, multiply that by 24. So now is that 4,800 bucks? So if I've got 4,800 bucks, could I then, but that's a lot of out of pocket. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take some of that savings and I'll put some of it into, maybe I'll buy some supplemental health benefits, some gap coverage. So in case
Right.
that I get hospitalized or I have a critical illness, cancer, or something, or if I had an accident, if I go in the hospital, that'll cover parts of that.
Yep.
Now, maybe I take some of the savings, I put it into an HSA in case I do have out of pocket, I'll take it out of there. And then now I still have savings to go and put more into my 401k and make sure I hit that match maximum. It's just a balancing, because otherwise we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, you need to save more. And they're going to say, do you know how much money just came out of my paycheck for all these other things? Like, no. By the way, I have a kid in college, or I'm paying off a student loan, or I have, all these other things all over. My car just broke down. So we're trying to do is create that balance to say, well, you know what, your car broke down. Let's set up an emergency savings so that happens. You've got that account rather than your tax advantaged account where you get taxed and penalized if you take it out. Another
Bill,
protection component.
Bill, I'm going to wrap on this thought as you just said it. So much of it is in the presentation, because when Netflix asks me, do you like action movies, right? Do you
Mm-hmm.
like this kind of, like, they're asking me just, and it's really simple, click, 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 right? And then all of a sudden it's like, thanks, we're going to help provide you with some more recommendations. And then based on that, we're going to get closer and closer to showing you things that you really will likely be interested in. That same notion of saying, to the extent I'm willing to share with you some of this information, you're going to help give me the information that I need, so that maybe I discover I am overpaying on the insurance part and I need to rebalance it, and then everybody wins.
And people, it's funny, data is one of the biggest topics in the industry, and not just in every industry, and particularly when it comes down to personal data. I've read a lot of research that say people, actually, or surveys, are willing to share data if there's something in it for them.
Right.
Number one, it has to be secure and they have to feel very comfortable and all that. But if you're doing something for me, then I'll do that. And it's almost like one of those where people get nervous about sharing data, and I totally understand it. I'm similar. Every morning when I woke up, I shared data.
Totally. Right.
Wherever I drove to, whatever, I'm sharing data. And
Yep.
so, when you get to that where it's like, yeah, I know the world knows everything about me. I'm speaking. There's the
There he
William. You want
is.
to say hi? I'm on a podcast right now, buddy. Yeah, I want to say hi.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, buddy.
Talk about that.
Okay, I'll be there.
Hey, this is great. It's so good to meet you.
You want to say, this is Mark, buddy. You want to say hi to Mark?
Mr. Mark,
Yeah.
It's
I
it's
told
a
you meet you because you're meaning of talk about what Voya Cares about.
We were just talking about Voya Cares, William.
Yes,
Yeah.
we were, and in fact, your dad was just talking about you, and so it's so great to meet you in person.
Yeah. Good luck.
All right.
All right,
Thank you
take
very much,
care.
buddy.
That's great.
Well,
That's. I think we just had the highlight of the whole time.
I think we covered right there how it is to work virtually and that you get inside everyone's homes and no filter. I think we
Oh, I
covered that in
love
about
it.
20 seconds.
I think that was just my favorite podcast moment in 52 episodes. Um, Bill, on that note, if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to reach you or to learn more about Voya?
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so they can certainly find out more about what we're doing at Voya, things I'm thinking about on LinkedIn. And also, I'm a fellow podcaster as well, but my counterpart, Heather LaValle, who's our CEO of our wealth solutions. Heather and I have a podcast, Hire Through Retire, and then we talk a lot about health and wealth thinking. We'll bring outside speakers and what are some best thoughts, what are data, what are customers doing that are unique. And so really interesting stuff. We've even gone sort of different topics on DE&I and reverse mentorship areas. That was a very popular podcast. So it's been a lot of fun, but they can certainly learn more through that as well.
Hire Through Retire, and is that available on Apple Podcasts and others?
Yep, and Spotify. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, wonderful. Bill, this has been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for being part of the show, and look forward to continuing our conversation.
Absolutely, Mark. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
You've been listening to The Adapter's Advantage, a podcast from Allego. Stay connected by subscribing to the show at allego.com/podcast, leaving us a rating and comment, and sharing episodes you love. That helps us bring you more conversations about breakthrough moments that lead to success. Thanks for listening. Until next time, remember that one new idea can change your life.